The feasts of Ingathering, the festival of Ingathering, pre-first and second temple. We're going to be looking at the ancient form of the feast of Ingathering. The cultic calendar in Leviticus 23 differs from those found in the book of Exodus. The older calendars, as we see in the book of Exodus, had only 3 celebrations: unleavened bread, weeks, and then tabernacles. We find these in Exodus 23 and Exodus 34. The book of Leviticus lists these 3, but it includes Passover, and it calls it a holy convocation. And then we see that 2 new festivals are mentioned. In the 7th month, we have the celebration that would become known as Rosh Hashanah, the 4 New Year's festival, which happens on the first day of the month. And then the second new festival that we see is Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, which is on the 10th day of that same month. A brief statement on the Passover. The Passover was originally a family celebration. It became a pilgrimage festival only in the context of the reform of King Josiah. Again, the older calendars had only 3 celebrations: unleavened bread, weeks, tabernacles. Leviticus 23 lists these 3 festivals. It lists the Passover as a holy convocation. And then we see 2 new feasts, Rosh Hashanah and then Yom Kippur. I want to hang my hat on the feast of Ingathering, tabernacles. The earliest biblical sources do not use the appellation the Feast of Sukkoth. Rather, the oldest cultic calendar calls it the Festival of Ingathering. The Festival of Ingathering. Exodus 23. And the festival of the harvest, the first fruits of your labors, which you will sow in the field, and the festival of the ingathering at the departure of the year. Exodus 34. 6 days you may work, and on the 7th day you shall rest. In plowing and in harvest you shall rest. And you shall make for yourself a festival of weeks, the first of the wheat harvest, and the festival of ingathering at the turn of the year. So we see that Exodus 23 and Exodus 34, the old cultic calendars, don't name this festival Sukkoth. It calls it the festival of ingathering. Let's go to Exodus 23 again. Exodus 23 tells us that the festival of the ingathering at the departure of the year, which means that at the end of the year. So we note that according to Exodus 23, the ingathering festival occurs at the end of the year when you gather in the results of your work from the field. Exodus 23. Exodus 34 tells us that the festival of the ingathering at the turn of the year. So in Exodus 34, we are told that it happens at the turn of the year. That's pretty vague, but it gives us a very interesting insight. The vague designation, the turn of the year, indicates that no calendrical date had been fixed. So, peasants apparently celebrated after the completion of their labors, a time which varied from year to year, because you have to consider the normal climatic fluctuations. A specific date time is not set. It only tells us the turn of the year. The turn of the year is not fixed. In verses 23, it says, 3 times during the year shall all your males appear directly before the master. So the verses supply no information other than commanding all male Israelites to appear before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh at this time. We have 2 celebrations described in the book of Judges that we can connect to this festival of Ingathering. It means that it is pre-first temple, pre-monarchy. There are 2 celebrations described in the book of Judges that we can connect to the festival of Ingathering. Judges 9. And they went out into the field and gathered the grapes of their vineyards and trod them and made dances. And they came into the house of their God and ate and drank. So this verse tells us how the residents of Shechem, a Canaanite village, went out into the fields, gathered and trod out the vintage of their vineyards, and made a festival. They then entered the temple of their God, ate, drank, and rejoiced. This is Judges 9. Now look at Judges 21. And they said, behold, there is a sacrifice before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in Shiloh from time to time, which is to the north of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goes up to Bethel to Shechem, and to the south of Lebanon. And they instructed the children of Benjamin, saying, go and lie in wait in the vineyards, and you will see, and behold, if the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances, then you shall come out of the vineyards, and you shall grab for yourself each man his wife of the daughters of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin. Judges 21 refers to the annual feast of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh now being held at Shiloh. It mentions that women danced in the vineyards. So we have a very old description of this feast. These descriptions that we've just read point to a vintage festival of primitive agricultural character. Note that the fall festival is the annual feast of Yah, because it says, behold, there is a sacrifice before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in Shiloh from time to time. It's the annual feast of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, which is an indication of its importance already in early times. But notice that this old feast or festival Pre-monarchy, pre-first temple, is not called Sukkoth or booths. I repeat that. The fall festival we're looking at is called the Feast of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, an indication of its importance already in early times in the book of Judges, when you did not even have 12 tribes. It was not called Sukkoth. It was not called booths. It was called the feast or the festival of Ingathering. The book of Deuteronomy first connects the fall feast to booths or to Sukkoth or to a sukkah. We read in Deuteronomy 16, "You shall make for yourself the festival of Sukkoth for 7 days, when you gather in the produce from your threshing floor and your vat. And you shall rejoice in your festival, you and your son and your daughter and your manservant and your maidservant and the Levite and the stranger and the orphan and the widow who are within your cities. 7 days you shall celebrate the festival to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, your Elohim, in the place which Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh shall choose, because Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, your Elohim, will bless you in all your produce and in all the work of your hands, and you will be happy." We notice two things here. Number one, no explanation is given for the title, the Festival of Sukkoth, or booths. We don't get any explanation for that title. Number two, the book of Deuteronomy links the ingathering specifically to that of grain and wine from the processing places. No explanation is given for the title, the Festival of Sukkoth. So where is the book of Deuteronomy deriving these booths title from? Where is it deriving this booth, Sukkoth or Sukkah, title from? It may be derived from the booths that sheltered watchmen in the fields throughout the summer. So during the busy harvest season, field workers camped out in booths, and when they had completed the labor, celebrated the festival there. That could be one option. Or it could be from the pilgrims who stayed in booths during the celebrations at cult sanctuaries or at the Jerusalem temple. And the booths, therefore, have no connection to the harvest. These are the two positions that scholars debate on. So it may seem that the sukkah probably derives from the booths commonly built in the fields. Booths commonly built in vineyards to protect from the elements. That is what I subscribe to. That is what seems to make more sense in its ancient setting. Isaiah 1 tells us, "And the daughter of Zion shall be left like a hut in a vineyard, like a lodge in a cucumber field, like a besieged city." So we see that the booth has a connection with agriculture, not with pilgrimage or pilgrims. Jonah 4 tells us, and Jonah had gone out of the city and had stationed himself on the east of the city, and there he made himself a hut and sat under it in the shade. Speaks more of structures in the field and not in the towns or in the cities. So the view that this Sukkoth may be derived from the pilgrims who stayed in booths during the celebrations at called sanctuaries or at the Jerusalem temple, I doubt is accurate. Maybe if you're looking at Sukkoth after Josiah's reform, maybe B will be accurate. But we're looking at the most ancient evidence of the Feast of Ingathering in the text. It was peasants that used these booths throughout the harvest and gathering season. So the festival was named for them. So we see that the agricultural origin is more plausible. Biblical passages set Sukkoth, or the Feast of Ingathering, in vineyards and fields, and do not suggest pilgrims resided in Sukkoth until the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. Let's go back to Deuteronomy 16. We are told in 15, 7 days you shall celebrate the festival to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh your Elohim. Here, the 7-day length of the festival is prescribed. We don't see that in the old cultic calendar. Though Sukkoth, or the festival of ingathering, undoubtedly was an ancient practice, the obligation to dwell in a sukkah for a 7-day festival is an innovation of the Holiness Code, what we call H. I'll repeat that. The obligation to dwell in Sukkoth, in a sukkah, in a booth for a 7-day festival is an innovation by H, the Holiness Code. The command to reside in booths appear only in H, where the booths served a ritual function during the actual celebration. I repeat that. The command to reside in booths appears only in the Holiness Code, where the booths themselves served a ritual function during the actual celebration. We know that the restoration community observed this commandment, and thereafter Sukkoth became the practice in Jerusalem as well. Dwelling in a sukkah, a booth, for 7 days. What else do we see in Deuteronomy 16? Verses 14, and you shall rejoice in your festival, you and your son and your daughter and your manservant and your maidservant and the Levite and the stranger and the orphan and the widow who are within your cities. So at Sukkoth, the Deuteronomistic authors expected the entire people to gather at the central sanctuary. Was that the case in the ancient form of the feast? Not necessarily, because the booths served a utilitarian function, providing shelter for peasants during the labors of the harvest of ingathering. If most peasants occupied booths as temporary shelters, some would have sufficed without it. Those who lived close enough to the fields would lodge at their houses. So in the old cultic calendar, the title Feast of Booths would have had a descriptive rather than a prescriptive sense. I repeat that. The title Festival of Booths or Sukkoth had a descriptive rather than a prescriptive sense in earlier sources. I repeat that again. The title Festival of Booths had a descriptive rather than prescriptive sense in earlier sources. Now we come to Leviticus 23 and then Numbers 29, where we see the most detailed legislation concerning the festival. Leviticus 23 verses 33 to 44 and Numbers 29 verses 12 to 34 presents the most detailed legislation concerning the festival. Leviticus 23 verses 33 to 38 is from the P source. Leviticus 23, 39 to 44 is from the H source. Let's look at the P source. And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, On the 15th day of this 7th month is the festival of Sukkoth, a 7-day period to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Okay. P designates the 15th of the 7th month as the day that the festival of Sukkoth commences. And P legislates that the celebration lasts for 7 days. Now, the fixed date reflects a later era where the festivals became institutionalized. Why do I say that? The earlier sources leave the date open, since completion of the harvest varied from year to year. But here in Leviticus, we are given dates, which tells us that we are dealing, or the dates reflect a later era when these feasts became institutionalized. Verses 36, we are told, For a 7-day period, you shall bring a fire offering to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. On the 8th day, it shall be a holy occasion to you. So here, P also prescribes an additional gathering on the 8th day. Work is prohibited on the 1st day and on the gathering on the 8th day. The 8th day is not mentioned in earlier legislation or even in earlier narrative sources. It apparently also comprises a later development. In addition, the precise nature of the gathering on the 8th day and its relationship to Sukkoth is unclear. So this is P. This is the P source. Let's look at the H source. The H source adds several new components to the directives for Sukkoth. Leviticus 23, let's read from 39. And on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you gather in the produce of the land, you shall celebrate the festival of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh for a 7-day period. The 1st day shall be a rest day, and the 8th day shall be a rest day. And you shall take for yourself on the 1st day the fruit of the hadar tree, date palm fronds, a branch of a braided tree, and willows of the brook, And you shall rejoice before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh your Elohim for a 7-day period. I'm not going to go into this. What is listed in verses 40 is or has to do with a fertility ritual. A fertility ritual. I'm not going into that because that is not my focus. 41. And you shall celebrate it as a festival to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh for 7 days in the year. It is an eternal statute throughout your generations that you celebrate it in the 7th month. For a 7-day period you shall live in booths. Every resident among the Israelites shall live in booths, in order that your ensuing generations should know that I had the children of Israel live in booths when I took them out of the land of Egypt. I am Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh your Elohim. And Moshe told the children of Israel these laws of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh's appointed holy days. So, like P, H assigns the date to the 15th of the 7th month and prescribes complete rest for the 1st and then the 8th day. H employs the title, the Festival of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and it refers to the ingathering. Okay. H then mentions the processions with branches, which actually characterizes agricultural festivals. That's why I said it was that of a fertility ritual, because most people did that. The ritual is most likely a fertility rite of some sort. H commands that all Israel reside in booths for 7 days. Remember what I said earlier. The booths served a utilitarian function, providing shelter for peasants during the labors of the harvest and ingathering. If most peasants occupied booths as temporary shelters, some would have sufficed without it. Those who lived close enough to the fields would lodge at their houses, as I said earlier. That is, the title, Festival of Booths, had a descriptive rather than a prescriptive sense in the earlier sources, as we've seen. But what does H do? H transforms what had been an aspect of the festival into a religious obligation. H transforms what had been an aspect of the festival into a religious obligation. Booths no longer serve a utilitarian function, but constitute a central ritual of the festival. This is how H transforms the booths. Let's go on. H also appends an historical explanation. Look at verses 42. For a 7-day period you shall live in booths. Every resident among the Israelites shall live in booths, in order that your ensuing generations shall know that I had the children of Israel live in booths when I took them out of the land of Egypt. I am Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh your Elohim. So here H appends an historical explanation. The Festival of Booths, according to H, commemorates the booths in which the Israelites dwelt during the desert sojourn. It means that the ritual of sitting in booths, according to H, reenacts an experience from the times of the ancestors. But this historical explanation is somewhat strange. Why do I say that? Because the narratives in the Pentateuch which tells us about the Exodus trek, never placed the Israelites in booths. They lodged at a place called Sukkoth, the name of a place, but not in booths. So the historical explanation is somewhat strange because the Pentateuchal narratives of the trek from Egypt never placed the Israelites in booths. Suddenly, H refers to some historical event unknown to the rest of the Bible. Quite interesting. Look at Ezekiel 45. Ezekiel 45 also mentions the festival of Ingathering. What does it tell us? In the first, on the 14th day of the month, shall you have the Passover, a festival of 7 days. Unleavened bread shall be eaten, and the prince shall make on that day for himself and for all the people of Israel a bull for a sin offering. On the 7 days of the festival he shall make a burnt offering to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. 7 bulls and 7 rams without blemish daily for 7 days, and a sin offering, a he-goat daily. And a meal offering he shall make an ephah for a bull and an ephah for a ram, and for each ephah 1 hin of oil. Verse 25. In the 7th month, on the 15th day of the month, on the festival, he shall do the same for 7 days. What shall he do for 7 days? 7 bulls and 7 rams without blemish daily for 7 days, and a sin offering, a he-goat daily, and a meal offering he shall make an ephah for a bull and an ephah for a ram, and for each ephah 1 hin of oil. So verse 25 is telling us that in the 7th month, on the 15th day of the month, on the festival, meaning that the festival of Ingathering or Sukkoth, the prince shall do the same for 7 days, what has been listed in verses 23 and 24. A similar sin offering, a similar burnt offering, a similar meal offering, and similar oil. So Ezekiel prescribed sacrifices for the 7 days of the festival. The 7 bulls, 7 rams, and 1 goat required for each day differ somewhat from the list that we find in the book of Numbers. And here in the book of Ezekiel, the date is set on the 15th of the 7th month. And no 8th day gathering is mentioned. I repeat that. No 8th day gathering is mentioned. Let's look at Ezekiel's list of 7 bulls, 7 rams without blemish daily for 7 days. Daily for 7 days. 7 bulls, 7 rams without blemish daily for 7 days. The list differ from the list in the book of Numbers. Numbers 29. What do we read? And on the 15th day of the 7th month, there shall be a holy convocation for you. You shall not perform any mundane work, and you shall celebrate a festival to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh for 7 days. You shall offer up a burnt offering, a fire offering, for a spirit of satisfaction to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. 13 young bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs. In the first year, they shall all be unblemished. Okay? And on the second day, 12 young bulls, 2 rams, and 14 lambs in the first year, all unblemished. And on the third day, 11 bulls, 2 rams, and 14 lambs in the first year, all unblemished. And on the fourth day, 10 bulls, 2 rams, and 14 lambs in the first year, all unblemished. Let's go to verses 32. And on the seventh day, 7 bulls, 2 rams, and 14 lambs in the first year, all unblemished. 35. The 8th day shall be a time of restriction for you. You shall not perform any mundane work. You shall offer up a burnt offering, a fire offering for a spirit of satisfaction to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. 1 bull, 1 ram, and 7 lambs in the first year, all unblemished. What is going on here with this strange ritual in Numbers 29? Okay, the first day requires 13 bulls, 2 rams, and 14 lambs. And on each succeeding day, the number of bulls is reduced by 1. So from 13 bulls, you go to 12 bulls, you go to 11 bulls, 10 bulls, 9 bulls, all the way to the 7th day where you have 7 bulls. You will notice that the sacrifices for the 8th day is 1 bull, 1 ram, and 7 lambs. It deviates from the pattern that we have seen. From 13 to 12 to 11, the 8th day sacrifice differs from the pattern. But if you look at what Ezekiel tells us and what the book of Numbers tells us, it's not the same. In the book of Numbers, the number of bulls reduces by 1. Ezekiel tells us we should do the killing of the exact number or the same number of bulls that we did on the first day for 7 days. It doesn't tell us to subtract 1, to reduce it by 1. So we see a conflict there. Why am I showing you this? I think it's about time we take our studies seriously and really understand these feasts, how they may have evolved, and check if what we are keeping, how we are keeping, is its purest form. The Sukkah, as I said, probably derives from the booths commonly built in the fields and vineyards for protection from the elements. Peasants use the booths throughout the harvest and gathering season, so the festival was named for them. Age transforms what had been an aspect of the festival, an aspect of it, into a religious obligation. Booths no longer serve a utilitarian function, but now it constitutes a central ritual of the festival. So now we've developed the ritual of sitting in booths. What about the ingathering?